All right, let's dive into a chapter of the Bible that asks a pretty wild question. If God's grace, his forgiveness, is basically infinite, then why not just sin more to get more of it? Sounds logical, right? Well, we're about to go on a verse-by-verse visual journey through Romans chapter 6 to see the absolutely stunning answer. So, right out of the gate, the chapter hits us with this massive, logical, and honestly super provocative question. See, the Apostle Paul just spent a ton of time explaining God's incredible, overwhelming grace. So the natural, almost cheeky follow-up is, hey, if getting forgiven feels so amazing, why don't we just go nuts and sin more so we can get more forgiveness? And here it is, verse 1. You can almost picture someone standing at a crossroads. They know grace is like this super powerful cleaning agent. They look over at a giant mud puddle, that's sin, and they think, if I jump in there and get totally filthy, won't the feeling of getting clean be even better? That's the exact question being asked. Paul's answer in verse 2 is immediate. It's an absolute thundering no. But it's his reason that's so mind-blowing. He doesn't just say, 'cause it's wrong. He asks, how can you possibly live in a place you've already died to? Imagine walking out of a cemetery and you happen to look over and see your own name carved on a tombstone. That old life, the person who was all about the mud puddle, they're gone. You don't live there anymore. Now, this whole idea of being dead to sin, it sounds a little dark, doesn't it? But it's not. It's actually the setup for an incredible plot twist, a funeral that leads directly to a birth. And Paul uses the powerful image of baptism to explain exactly how this works. All right, so in verses 3 and 4, Paul gets super specific. First, in verse 3, he says we're baptized into Christ's death. Just picture being plunged completely under the water. It's a symbolic burial of your old self. But then, verse 4 describes that moment you come back up. Imagine bursting through the surface into this brilliant, blinding sunlight, taking that first gasp of air in a brand new world. This isn't just about getting cleaned up. It's about being made completely new. Verse 5 takes it even deeper, saying we've been united together with him. It's like watching a branch being grafted onto a massive living tree. Suddenly, it's not separate anymore. It's part of the tree, getting all its life from it. Then verse 6 gets even more intense. It says our old man was crucified with him. I mean, picture a shadowy, worn-out version of you just being left behind on that cross, while the real, vibrant you walks away into the light, totally free. And that, right there, illustrates the whole point. Verse 7 is one of the simplest, most liberating statements you'll ever read. To picture it, just imagine a prisoner who's been in chains their entire life, and then suddenly, with just a soft little sound, the chains crumble into dust. The cell door just swings open. They are simply free, because death severs all obligations. So, here's the crucial point. This whole thing isn't just about what we left behind. The focus completely shifts now. We died to something so we could be alive for someone. We're living in an entirely different reality. In verse 8, we see it's about companionship. We're not walking away from that tombstone all by ourselves. We're walking side by side with a living, triumphant Christ. And then verse 9 gives us this epic visual. Death itself is a defeated king. I mean, picture his crown shattered on the ground, his throne toppled over, his power is broken. Death has no dominion, no rule over Christ. And because we're with him, it has no dominion over us either. Okay, so verses 10 and 11 are where the rubber meets the road. Verse 10 is like the sound of a judge's gavel slamming down one last time. Case closed. The case against sin is done forever. Then verse 11 tells us to reckon, which basically means consider it a fact, that this is true for us too. The visual is simple. You look in a mirror, but instead of seeing the old, tired, defeated you, your reflection is vibrant, glowing, alive to God. You have to start seeing yourself that way. So now that this brand new identity is set in stone, Paul introduces a second, equally powerful metaphor. If you don't belong to your old self, then who do you belong to? It boils down to a choice between two masters and two very, very different kinds of service. So what do we actually do? Verses 12 and 13 give us the command. For verse 12, picture a tiny, screaming, tyrannical little king named Sin sitting on a throne that's shaped like a human heart. The command is to get up and physically push him off, dethrone him. Then verse 13 gives us this image of a person's hands. At first, they're offering a weapon to some shadowy dark figure. But then they turn and offer a building tool, like a hammer, to a brilliant figure of light. You choose what your body is going to be an instrument for. And here's the promise in verse 14 that makes all of this possible. Let's go back to that little king Sin. We see him again, but this time he's not just off the throne. He's locked behind the bars of a cage. He can scream, he can rattle the bars, but he has no real power, no dominion, over the person who's now standing free under grace. Paul then asks pretty much the same question from verse 1, but from a new angle. In verse 15, he's basically asking, okay, so if I'm not under the strict rule of the law anymore, does that mean I have a license to go break all the rules? You can think of it like getting a full presidential pardon and then immediately asking the guard on your way out, awesome, does this mean I'm free to go commit more crimes now? And the answer, once again, is a loud and clear, certainly not. Verse 16 lays out the logic with brutal honesty. We're all standing between two paths, and we have to choose a master. We can offer ourselves to sin, and that path ends in a wasteland called death. Or we can offer ourselves in obedience to God, and that path leads to life and righteousness. According to Paul, there's no third option, no middle ground. You can just feel the sense of overwhelming relief in verses 17 and 18. The visual here is of someone who was once chained to this cruel, demanding master, and then they're suddenly set free. But instead of just running wild, they turn, walk up to a kind and righteous king, and willingly offer their service. It's not a forced slavery. It's a joyful, chosen allegiance. In verses 19 through 21, Paul asks us to just be honest and remember the old life. It's like a flashback. You see a person just working their tail off, sweating in this barren field that only grows thorns and weeds. At the end of a long day, their old master pays them with a basket of rotten, disgusting fruit that makes them sick. That's the fruit of that old life, the things you're now ashamed of that ultimately lead to death.
And this all builds to the incredible climax of the chapter. Paul is about to put the two final paychecks, the two ultimate outcomes, right next to each other. One is a wage you have to earn. The other is a gift that is freely given.
Verse 22 gives us that beautiful contrast. Picture the same person, but now they're working in a lush, sun-drenched garden, and they're harvesting this beautiful, delicious, life-giving fruit. This is the outcome, the fruit of serving God. It's a process of becoming holy, and the end result is everlasting life. Now for the first part of maybe the most famous verse in the entire chapter, verse 23. For the wages of sin is death. Imagine that old, cruel master, Sin, handing over one final payslip. But as the person takes it, the paper just instantly turns to dust and blows away in the wind. That's the wage you earn for that work. Emptiness, finality, death. And then the immediate, breathtaking contrast. But the gift of God is eternal life. The scene just cuts to your new master, God, and he's not holding a payslip. He's holding out a beautifully wrapped gift box, and it's glowing with this warm light from inside. You didn't earn it. You could never earn it. It is offered freely. That right there is grace. And that's the journey of Romans 6. It starts with that question, why not sin more? And it ends with a choice between two masters, two outcomes, two final payments. One is a wage you earn, death. The other is a gift you can only receive, eternal life. Paul's whole argument hangs on that one final truth. So the question really isn't about whether you should jump back in the mud. The real question is, knowing this gift is being held out to you right now, how are you going to unwrap it today?